want an opportunity to make plans to how we're going to counter that. And that availability will begin today at the conclusion of the March Rally and Speak Out. So I encourage anyone that wants to stay and be a part of what direction those actions should take to come with ideas at that time. So, our first speaker today, I'm very excited to tell you, is an activist within the National Lawyers Guild. She's done a lot of work as an attorney helping Occupy San Diego. She's a longtime activist. She's also served as a clinic escort in Detroit and has been an abortion rights activist since 2004. It's my pleasure to bring to you today Adriane Bracciale.
Thank you for that. It's so nice to hear an unapologetic demand for abortion, unequivocal. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And when people ask me how I first got involved in politics and I tell them the first issue I became passionate about was abortion rights, a lot of times people are confused. They say, well, I thought that was legal. Why is that still an issue? And you know, the right has dominated the discussion about abortion for so long that people don't know what the real facts are. It's very rare when you have a frank conversation about abortion that's not some amorphous discussion about babies, as if the woman with the medical decision doesn't even exist. But it's a fact that 1 in 3 women in this country will need an abortion sometime in her life. All of us know someone who has had an abortion or will need one. And I tell people who ask me why it's still an issue that things have gotten so bad since 1973 and before that, that there have been numerous legal restrictions on abortion, that the number of abortion providers have been isolated from hospitals, become vulnerable to physical attacks and bombings, that doctors who save women's lives by performing these necessary procedures have been assassinated, up until very recently with the assassination of Dr. Tiller, at the urging of Bill O'Reilly and other right-wing pundits. It's gotten to the point where 87% of counties have no abortion provider, and 97% of rural counties. Some states only have one. And with all the legal restrictions, such as 24-hour waiting rules, informed consent laws, where women are given pamphlets on adoption, and parental consent, the cutting of federal funding so that Medicaid does not cover abortion, the fact that most private insurance companies don't cover abortion, for most poor women in this country, it's as if Roe versus Wade never happened. The World Health Organization does a study on abortion worldwide every year. In 2008, the number of deaths caused by unsafe abortions was 47,000, and it's been much higher. Some of those deaths happen in this very country. They've been documented, but we don't know all of their names. And studies have shown time and time again that restricting and prohibiting abortion does not reduce the number of abortions. It just means that more women die. So how did it get this bad? Now, I can't go through the whole history, and I would highly recommend a 3-part documentary that starts with a 28-minute documentary you can find on YouTube called Untold Stories When Abortion Was Illegal. Now, you may not know that up until the mid-1800s in this country, abortion was legal and freely available. It was allowed by both the Protestant and Catholic churches. In the mid-1800s, so that doctors had control over what they could charge and what procedures were performed. And women were forced out of the jobs they've been performing for decades. In many parts of the country, if a woman performed an abortion herself or had somebody do it for her, if there were complications and she needed medical attention, before she could receive it, she had to testify and implicate the man who had impregnated her and anyone who had helped her receive the abortion. And many women did not survive the court proceedings. Now, Roe v. Wade attacked a Texas statute that had been on the books since 1847. It allowed abortion only in the cases of rape or to save the mother's life. And it takes a judge a long time, longer than 9 months, to determine whether the mother's life really was threatened. And doctors were prosecuted if they could not say with certainty that the woman would die without the abortion. The 3 plaintiffs were a woman who was pregnant and could not get an abortion, a married couple where the wife had health complications but could not prove that she would for certain die if she received an abortion, and a doctor who had been criminally prosecuted for performing abortions. And there were many doctors who can tell you that in the 50s and 60s, they would see 20 to 30 women a day in the hospital from complications from receiving abortions from people who didn't know what they were doing or from doing it themselves with coat hangers or Clorox or medications that they didn't know what would do to them. And many women couldn't receive the medical treatments that they needed to save their lives because they didn't want to tell the truth about what they had done, because they were breaking the law. Now, Roe v. Wade is a very poorly written decision. There aren't many I don't think there are any constitutional law professors who can really get behind it. In the language of the decision, while it says that a woman has a right to abortion under a narrowly drawn right to privacy, states have an interest in protecting fetal life and regulating abortion. So it really opened the floodgates to all of these horrible laws that make abortion almost impossible for women to access. No, what a lot of people, under the 9th Amendment, the enumeration of rights, the Constitution is not supposed to take any rights away. But it was legal at the time the Constitution was written. So by the strictest constitutional analysis, abortion should be legal. This shouldn't be a complicated question with hundreds of pages of briefs and Scalia blustering that there is no constitutional right to an abortion, who, by the way, also dissented to Troy Davis's receiving an evidentiary hearing, saying that it is constitutional to execute an innocent person. Well, that's really Now, in 1977, Senator Hyde authored the Hyde Amendment that banned federal funding for abortion. It meant that women who had been on Medicaid could no longer receive abortion and have it funded. But Senator Hyde, in interviews, people told him, well, you know, wealthy women will still be able to get abortions. And he said that he knew, but he would settle for poor women being prevented.
Damn.
One of those women was Rosie Jimenez. Less than than 2 months after the Hyde Amendment went into effect. She was a single mother. She had a 5-year-old daughter. She was 6 months away from getting her teaching certificate. And she was turned away from a clinic that provided abortion because Medicaid would no longer pay for it. She went to Mexico and she got an abortion from somebody who was not qualified. She was later back in the Texas hospital, dying of septic shock. And it was too late. We can't know how many women died because of this, but there were at least 5 other women in Texas hospitals that year alone who died from similar complications, and Medicaid cards were found in their wallets.
Shame on high.
Yeah.
Shame on high. 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 Shame on high.
And now he's dead.
But his legacy lives on. That's the bad news.
Yes.
In 1992, different public interest groups sued over 24-hour waiting rules, where a woman is given information about adoption and false information about abortion and told to wait a day before she could get the procedure. It also challenged parental notification laws, that before a minor can access an abortion, a restriction that does not exist for any other medical procedure, she had to get written consent from her parents. And this was in 92, and 5 justices in the initial consultation were ready to overturn Roe versus Wade. And a lot of people think that it will be left up to the states. That's not true, because 38 states have trigger laws on the books, so that if Roe versus Wade is overturned, there will be an immediate outright ban on abortion. Casey versus Planned Parenthood is where the undue burden test came in. Conveniently undefined. In the decision, the court upheld Roe, but also upheld the restrictions on accessing abortion, saying even though some, and indeed many women, would be prevented from getting abortions, that it was not high enough to meet an undue burden. And they knew that women would die. Such a massive indifference to human life in these abortion decisions. And it's important to note that under the constitutional analysis, under all the case law that exists, discrimination against women is not held to the highest standard, as other forms of discrimination are. And many constitutional law scholars note that if discrimination against women was taken as seriously as other forms of discrimination, and even the Supreme Court justices have acknowledged this, that none of these restrictions on abortion would be constitutional.
Wow.
But instead they carved out this undue burden. I'm going to talk about one more case and then wrap up. In 2007, Gonzalez versus Carhart, and going back to how the right has dominated the conversation on abortion, there's this term partial birth abortion that's been thrown around. The real term is intact dilation and extraction. It's in less than 1% of pregnancies where something has gone horribly wrong, and it is medically necessary to save the woman's life or her fertility. This had been struck down by the ban on so-called partial birth abortion had been struck down by the Supreme Court as unconstitutional because there was no health exception, which was most important parts of Roe versus Wade. That a woman and a doctor can make a decision about her health. So it was struck down once in 2000, and then in 2007 again. Dr. Carhart sued over the federal statute. Congress had passed the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act of 2003, and he said this is so vague, it can ban all kinds of surgical abortions. This has a chilling effect on most surgical abortions, and it criminalizes doctors, and women will die. And both lower courts said, of course this is unconstitutional because there's no health exception. It totally flies in the face of Roe. But the Supreme Court, and the difference this time was there was Justice Roberts and Justice Alito, who had both been vetted partly because of their reactionary stance on abortion, made it possible for a 5-4 decision. So it is now a crime for doctors to perform this procedure. And doctors don't perform other procedures for fear of being prosecuted. And the Supreme Court ruled that it was okay for there to be no health exception because Congress had determined, despite all of the obstetricians and gynecologists from the American Association of Obstetricians and Gynecologists that had sent in affidavits says this is necessary to save a woman's life. Despite that, no health exception was okay because Congress determined that it was never medically necessary.
Wow.
Well, Congress's determination about my medical needs does not exactly inspire me with confidence. The fact is that the so-called pro-life movement is not concerned about protecting life. And one of my favorite chants is, right to life, your name's a lie. You don't care that women die. It is these same incredibly well-funded right-wing groups that push for banning of abortion, that push for banning of birth control, that promote the death penalty, that in some cases fund mercenary armies in Iraq and Afghanistan and around the world. It's not a concern with life, it's about controlling women. It's about policing women's sexuality. We say that abortion is a part of comprehensive health care, and health care is a right, not a privilege. I think one of the major underpinnings about why Occupy is necessary is because the people in charge don't have our interests in mind, and they're not making good decisions. And we can't leave decisions about women's lives and autonomy over our bodies up to Congress or two sexist, racist white men on the Supreme Court. Obviously, it's sex discrimination to restrict abortion, but because of the people who are disproportionately affected, it is a clear-cut example of racial and economic discrimination as well. So we need to bring back this movement to fight for abortion rights, to fight for women's rights, because we can't leave it up to those people in charge. We need to take charge and demand our rights back.